Los Angeles police would later say there was no clear evidence anyone had been stalking her, but Tasha Reynolds had been telling people the same thing for weeks. Someone was watching her. Friends assumed it was stress. Neighbors thought she was imagining things. Then, at 9:03 p.m., a Ring doorbell camera across the street recorded something investigators still struggle to explain. And by the time anyone took her seriously, Tasha was already gone. South Los Angeles runs on routine. Early buses rumble down narrow streets. Neighbors walk dogs before the heat settles in. Parents hurry children toward school gates before traffic builds. For Tasha Reynolds, routine meant stability. She was 27, a single mother raising her 4-year-old son, Malik, in a small apartment building near West 54th Street. The complex was aging, peeling paint on the stair rails, flickering lights in the hallway. But the rent was manageable, and Malik's daycare sat only a few blocks away. Tasha worked the front desk at a small community clinic in South Los Angeles. Most mornings started the same way: coffee in a travel mug, Malik half asleep in the back seat, the quiet 10-minute drive to daycare before work. Friends described her as careful, organized, the kind of person who planned everything a few days ahead, which is why in early April, something she said during lunch at work caught people off guard. She mentioned seeing the same dark SUV near her apartment at night. At first, it sounded harmless, someone's guest, maybe a neighbor's new car, but the vehicle kept appearing. Same spot across the street, same tinted windows. In most of the time, the engine was off. A few days later, Tasha brought it up again. This time, her voice sounded different. She told her coworker the SUV had been there 3 nights in a row, and the night before, around 10:32 p.m., she thought she saw movement inside the driver's seat. Just a shadow shifting, someone sitting there, watching the building. People brushed it off. Los Angeles streets were always busy. Cars came and went, but later that week, Tasha sent her sister a short message. "I think someone might be following me." At the time, it sounded like a passing worry. No one realized she had already started noticing the same car in more than one place. On this channel, we break down realistic crime stories and investigations, cases where small details slowly reveal the truth. If you enjoy calm, documentary-style true crime that feels real, consider subscribing and joining us as we uncover what really happened. At first, Tasha tried to explain it away. Los Angeles traffic made it easy to mistake one car for another. Dark SUVs were everywhere. Parking lots, side streets, grocery stores. It was possible she was just noticing something that had always been there, but the pattern kept repeating. One afternoon after work, Tasha stopped at a small grocery store a few blocks from the clinic. Nothing unusual, just milk, cereal, and a frozen dinner. When she walked back to her car, she paused. Across the parking lot sat a dark SUV, same shape, same tinted windows. It was parked 2 rows behind her Civic. She told herself it was a coincidence. Still, she waited a moment before getting into her car, just standing there with the grocery bag in her hand, glancing toward the windshield. No movement, no lights, just a quiet vehicle sitting under a flickering parking lot lamp. Tasha drove home, but halfway through the drive, something made her uneasy. At a red light near Normandy Avenue, she checked the rearview mirror. The SUV was there again. 2 cars behind her. The light turned green. Traffic moved slowly. Tasha turned right toward her apartment complex. The SUV turned too. Her chest tightened, but she kept driving. Maybe it was a neighbor heading the same direction. When she pulled into the small lot behind her building, she waited inside the car for a moment, watching the street. A few seconds later, the SUV passed the entrance. It didn't slow down. It didn't turn. It just continued driving down the block. Tasha exhaled. Maybe she had imagined it. But later that night, around 9:40 p.m., she stepped onto the narrow balcony outside her apartment, and across the street, Parked under the same streetlight as before, the dark SUV had returned, engine off, windows black, and this time it stayed there for nearly an hour. Over the next few days, Tasha started paying closer attention, not obsessively, just enough to notice patterns. The SUV didn't appear every night. Sometimes the street outside her apartment looked completely normal. Parked sedans, a delivery van, kids riding bikes in the early evening. But then it would come back. Same dark vehicle, same place across the street, always facing toward the apartment building. Tasha mentioned it again during a phone call with her older sister Danielle one evening around 8:15 p.m. Danielle tried to keep the conversation light. Los Angeles was full of cars like that, she said. Maybe someone new had moved into the neighborhood. But Tasha sounded certain. It's not just parked, she said quietly. Sometimes I think someone's sitting in it. A few nights later, something else happened. Tasha was leaving the clinic after a late shift. The parking lot behind the building was mostly empty by then. Just a few scattered cars under yellow security lights. As she walked toward her Civic, she slowed down. At the far end of the lot, near the exit, a dark SUV was parked sideways along the curb. Same shape, same tinted windows. The engine was running this time. She could hear it humming softly in the quiet lot. Tasha hesitated. For a moment, she considered walking back inside the clinic, asking the security guard to walk her to her car. But then, the SUV suddenly pulled away. It rolled toward the exit without stopping. Within seconds, it was gone. Tasha stood there for another minute, keys in her hand, trying to convince herself it was nothing. Still, when she got home that night, she did something she had never done before. She sent Danielle a short text. If anything weird happens, just remember I told you about that car. A few days passed without anything unusual. The SUV didn't appear outside Tasha's building. Work was normal. Malik's daycare schedule stayed the same. For a moment, it felt like the strange pattern had simply ended. Tasha even joked about it with Danielle during a quick phone call. Maybe I was just being paranoid, she said, but the feeling never completely left. Late one Thursday evening, around 9:18 p.m., Tasha returned home after picking Malik up from daycare and stopping for takeout. The street was quiet. A few porch lights glowed along the block. Someone down the road was playing music softly through an open window. Everything looked ordinary. She parked behind the apartment building and carried Malik upstairs, half asleep against her shoulder. Inside, the apartment was calm. Cartoons played quietly while Malik finished his dinner. Then, around 10:06 p.m., Tasha walked onto the small balcony again. She had started doing that every night, just a quick look across the street before going to bed. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Then, she noticed it. Down the block, near the corner, a dark SUV slowly rolled forward and stopped beneath a streetlight. The same vehicle, same tinted windows. This time, the engine stayed running. Tasha leaned against the balcony railing, trying to see through the windshield, but the glass reflected the yellow streetlight back toward her. She couldn't make out a face, only a faint silhouette behind the wheel. The SUV stayed there for several minutes. Then, without warning, the headlights turned on. The vehicle pulled away from the curb and drove slowly past her building. Not fast, not hurried, just slow enough that for a brief moment, the driver's side window passed directly beneath her balcony. Tasha stepped back into the apartment, heart racing, because this time she was certain of one thing: the driver had looked up. The next morning, Tasha tried to push the whole thing out of her mind. Los Angeles was full of late-night traffic. People drove through neighborhoods all the time. It didn't mean someone was watching her. Still, she started making small changes. Before leaving for work, she glanced down the street from the balcony. Before unlocking her car, she looked around the parking lot. Little habits, things people do when they feel uneasy but don't want to admit it. A week later, something else happened. Around 6:40 p.m., Tasha picked Malik up from daycare and stopped at a nearby gas station on Western Avenue. The place was busy, cars moving in and out, a line at the register inside. She finished pumping gas and was about to get back into the car when something caught her eye. Across the street, partially hidden behind a row of parked vehicles, sat a dark SUV, same size, same dark windows. It wasn't moving. It wasn't even parked at a pump, just sitting there near the edge of the lot. Tasha froze for a moment beside her car door, watching, waiting for someone to step out, but no one did. After a few seconds, she quickly got inside the Civic and locked the doors. Malik was talking in the back seat, unaware of anything unusual. Tasha started the engine and pulled out of the station. As she turned onto the road, she checked the side mirror. The SUV hadn't moved, but when she stopped at the next traffic light about a minute later, she looked in the rearview mirror and her stomach dropped. 2 cars behind her, the same dark SUV had joined the lane, moving slowly through traffic, following the exact route toward her apartment, and this time, it didn't turn away. The traffic light turned green. Cars began moving through the intersection, one by one. Tasha kept her eyes on the road, but every few seconds, she checked the rearview mirror. The dark SUV was still there, 2 cars behind. For a moment, she considered turning onto a different street, just to see what the driver would do. But Malik was in the back seat, humming along to the radio. The last thing she wanted was to start driving around the neighborhood late at night trying to test a theory. So she stayed on the normal route home. A few blocks later, she made a right turn onto the street leading toward her apartment complex. The SUV turned too. Now there was only 1 car between them. Tasha's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Maybe it was still coincidence. Maybe someone simply lived in the same area. But as she pulled into the small alley behind her building, something unexpected happened. The car between them kept driving straight. The SUV slowed near the entrance to the alley. For a second, it looked like the driver might follow her inside. Instead, the vehicle rolled past the entrance, slowly, almost like the driver was checking the parking lot as they passed. Then, it continued down the street and disappeared around the corner. Tasha stayed inside her car for nearly a minute, just listening to the engine idle, trying to calm down. Later that night, around 10:14 p.m., she decided to do something different. She opened the neighborhood safety app on her phone and posted a short message. Nothing dramatic, just a simple question. Has anyone else seen a dark SUV parked around West 54th lately? Within 20 minutes, someone replied, and the response made investigators pay attention later, because another neighbor had noticed the same vehicle 2 weeks earlier. The reply came from someone Tasha didn't know, a user on the neighborhood app named Carlos M. His message appeared about 20 minutes after Tasha posted the question. "Yeah," he wrote, "I've seen that SUV a few times near the corner. Thought it belonged to someone visiting." Tasha stared at the screen for a moment. Then she typed back, "Did you ever see who was driving it?" Several minutes passed before another notification appeared. Carlos replied again, "Not really. Windows are too dark, but one night I saw it parked outside for a long time." He included a detail that caught Tasha's attention. It had been around 9 p.m., he said. The vehicle was sitting across from her building, engine off, exactly where Tasha had seen it before. That night, she mentioned the message to Danielle during a phone call. Danielle sounded less dismissive this time. "If it keeps happening, you should probably report it, just so it's on record." Tasha agreed, but she never made the call. The next evening started normally. Dinner with Malik, a quick bath before bedtime. By 8:50 p.m., the apartment was quiet again. Tasha walked toward the balcony out of habit, just another quick look down the street. At first, everything looked normal. Then she noticed something new. Across the road, a neighbor's house had recently installed a Ring doorbell camera facing the sidewalk and street. Its small blue light blinked faintly in the dark. Tasha barely thought about it, but 13 minutes later, at 9:03 p.m., that same doorbell camera would capture footage investigators would replay hundreds of times, because the dark SUV returned to the street that night, and what happened next didn't look like someone simply parking a car. At 9:03 p.m., The Ring doorbell across the street activated, motion detected. The owner, Ethan Brooks, later told police he didn't even notice the alert until the next morning. It was a normal notification in a neighborhood full of passing cars. But when investigators reviewed the clip, they slowed it down, frame by frame. The video showed a dark SUV rolling slowly into view. It did not speed past. It did not turn immediately. It eased to the curb directly across from Tasha's building. The headlights stayed off. For several seconds, the vehicle remained still. Then the driver's door opened. The camera angle was limited, but the footage clearly showed a figure stepping out. Tall build, dark clothing. The person walked toward the sidewalk, not hurried, not casual either. They stopped near the front gate of Tasha's apartment complex. For nearly 30 seconds, the person stood there, looking up, toward the building, toward the balconies. Then the figure turned back to the SUV. Before getting inside, they appeared to glance once more at the property. The vehicle pulled away slowly. No sudden movement, no tire noise, just a quiet departure down the street. When detectives later obtained the footage, they cross-referenced it with nearby traffic cameras. The SUV passed 2 intersections within minutes. One camera captured the license plate partially, not fully readable, but enough to narrow the search. Investigators also checked mobile tower data from the area. A single mobile device had connected to a nearby cell tower during the same time frame, moving in sync with the vehicle's route. That detail changed everything because the pattern matched the exact times Tasha had described, and for the first time, police treated her concerns as a potential stalking case. But when officers arrived at her apartment the next afternoon to speak with her again, they discovered something unexpected about the SUV. Detectives confirmed the dark SUV was registered to a man named Marcus Hale, 34, living about 12 miles away in Inglewood. He had prior complaints for harassment from a former coworker, though nothing had led to charges. When officers brought him in for questioning, Marcus denied following anyone. He said he often drove through South Los Angeles because he had friends in the area. He claimed the ring footage showed nothing criminal, but when investigators showed him the time-stamped video and the traffic camera data, his story shifted. He admitted being in the neighborhood that night. He said he just wanted to see someone. He refused to explain further. There was no evidence he entered Tasha's apartment, no forced doors, no physical contact. Legally, the footage alone wasn't enough for an immediate arrest. Then detectives went back to review additional neighborhood cameras. At 11:22 p.m. the same evening as the ring footage, another camera captured the SUV parked 2 blocks away for nearly 40 minutes. Inside the apartment building, Tasha never saw the vehicle again after that night. A few days later, she requested a restraining order. The court granted a temporary one while the investigation continued. Months passed. No direct confrontation occurred, but the case remains open, tied to digital evidence and unanswered questions about intent. Some neighbors say they still think about that night at 9:03 p.m. The silent SUV, the figure at the gate, the calm movement under the streetlight, and whether Tasha's early warnings could have prevented everything if someone had listened sooner. If you enjoy realistic crime investigations that uncover the details behind cases like this, consider subscribing. We document stories carefully, focusing on facts, evidence, and the step-by-step process that reveals the truth.